let's start off the video with a spoiler warning for the most recent Trio of Idiots comics. As of writing this, the latest comic is out from like 3 hours ago, and I'll be talking about up to, the final part of the Attacker comic. So if you're not caught up, pause the video, go read them, then come back. I promise it does not take that long to read them. I promise. So what I call the breakup arc is over for the Trio of Idiots. Well, I don't know if you can even call it the Trio of Idiots, because there's literally no trio anymore, but I'll get back to that. This is a different kind of video. This is going to be very much my raw opinions as a whole on the arc, in a kind of off-the-cuff way, just spilling out my honest thoughts. Before I do talk about my opinions as a whole, though, I just want to walk you through the whole arc in case you need a refresher, since the arc is broken up and scattered in the middle of roughly 100 comics over the span of about a year, and existing and running concurrently with Beatrice and Diana recovery arcs and Beatrice marriage arc. I don't blame you if you don't quite remember the parts where, they break up. I don't expect you to know all the details cover to cover. Luckily, I am mentally ill enough to be able to write it cover to cover, so I got you covered. The whole breakup arc starts with the booking comics, where Diana spends 42 hours booking a flight to Ireland. Ireland, we'll get back to that. This kind of marks the first comic to feature exclusively the Trio of Idiots in a while, at the time when this released. When you think about it, booking part 1 was comic 215, and the last comic to feature exclusively the trio was Waterslide, comic 187, and over a year apart. Yeah, I see why guys were so starved to see some trio drama now. But when the Chip comics come around, Diana leaves and Nadroj gives her a very cold goodbye, which I guess, it's not that unusual for Nadroj to do. Hell, it wouldn't be that unusual for Diana to do to Nadroj either. But the comic. She ends up at the Carvation Village like a dumbass somehow, and Max matches up with Nadroj on a hookup app. And we have a moment of silence for the traumatic head injury that Max must have undergone to forget that she was definitely at their wedding. But we'll get back to that later. And Beatrice and Alicia try to make Diana have a good vacation at the village. And I would call out that Beatrice is being kind of judging, critical of Nadroj for not wanting to go with her wife to Ireland. But this is probably the least critical we've seen Beatrice still. In the video call comics, when Beatrice sets Diana up on a video chat with Nadroj, Beatrice gets heavy toxic vibes from was probably some pretty casual talk between the two, honestly. The only thing suspect I could say is that, the straight depressing talk that Nadroj has right there. But I can't imagine this conversation without laughing, because I just imagine Anne in the same room as Nadroj when she says that nobody seems to care, and just stares at her like, what the fuck? And yes, I'll say that Nadroj is justified in saying this. How does Diana keep doing this shit? Of course, this all culminates to Diana eventually going home early to see Nadroj, and that's when we see Nadroj and Max sleeping together. Max is justified in being angry at Nadroj for not telling her she was married, but at the same time, Max must be so unobservant, because I refuse to believe there was zero clue that Diana lived there in that room when she entered. Again, we'll get back to that later. It's not necessarily my favorite chapter, but even though I think it is still pretty good. Part 2 is really good. It says a lot without having to use any dialogue, which I really love. I hope he tries that again in the future, because really hit here. And then, of course, Diana goes back to the village, stays there, and then Diana's entire character arc is put on halt so Beatrice can get married. Then when they remember that Diana is living with them, her arc resumes. Beatrice gets her bailed out of working in the afterlife. Surprisingly painlessly too, very surprisingly. I have a hunch that will return later. Something will happen. Diana's gonna get her magic taken because she doesn't work for the afterlife anymore or something, I don't know. But I don't think that's the end of it. Diana sees Nadroj in a shit ton of places and does some good old protagonist gaslighting, saying that she didn't see her. Maybe she should be questioning if that fruit made specifically for carvations might have a bad effect on her. The tension really starts ramping up when the readers are shown Nadroj doing things like poisoning candy in their fridge or Diana. Or just generally trying to sabotage her eating disorder recovery, She does it pretty freaking stealthily and covertly, and I'm sure we'll be told her very nuanced ultimate end goals and motivations at the end of these comics as for why she does all of these actions.
Damn, bro, you got the whole squad laughing.
And then finally we get to the creme de la creme of the arc, where everything finally leads up to. Dramas ensue, tensions resolved, and somehow it's better than whatever the hell Marvel's been trying to do with Spider-Man for the past 6 years. So to summarize 8 parts in one paragraph, Nadroj poisons the jam for Diana. Beatrice ends up eating it, gets poisoned. Nadroj gives her a little prick in the stomach. Alicia lays a beating down, and Beatrice is sent to the hospital while Nadroj stands trial and gets sent to the Shadow Realm, where we get a Rian teaser. Huh, I guess that was in one sentence. I'm sure he'll get incorporated into some MCU level, roadmap later. Cue my Kevin Feige timeline while we have the shown right here. The Rian return story comes right after the Kang Dynasty movie. Okay, in all seriousness, I really do love these 8 comics. They're much more tension and action oriented than usual, and I love the rare scenario where there's actual, real stakes in these comics. I really appreciate it when there's real threat of a consequence, like a dire consequence, like dying. Not really dying, but you get what I mean. Attacker comics were definitely the best ones. They're also the final ones in the breakup arc because no more Nadroj, so breakup resolved. So let's move on to starting with the praise, because I think it's important to start with what I think the comics in this arc does really well. So to start off with what it does well, I think it definitely revitalized interest in the trio of idiots. The trio had not seen serious action since they went camping, and that's kind of generous. They'd never been strong characters, but I feel like in this story, even if Anne is absent and Nadroj acts a little weird, which I'll get to both of those things later, overall made me appreciate the trio as characters more. They were engaging in real story activity, doing real actions, real stakes, making real character development, and that's something they haven't done since before they died. Better late than never, even if there's no longer a trio. The comics also surprised me for the first time in a while. Beatrice being attacked, Nadroj being terminated. I couldn't have foreseen Nadroj's very stark characterization change. Even the things like the jam being poisoned took me by surprise. I didn't expect a thing. I didn't expect any of that. And that kind of leads me into my third point, where it was a gripping story with a good amount of tension, Most of the comics ended with something that made you want to read to the next part, which I think some of his comics can struggle with, especially because so many of them are kind of one-note comics, filler, jokes, that kind of thing. And even his more serialized ones can kind of lose tension in the middle, but this one really gripped you and got you wondering what was going to happen next, because Nadroj was dangerous and there were actual stakes, which is why I circle back to it was really good for having real stakes in the story of Nadroj potentially causing harm to Diana or someone else. Oh wait, I can't forget the most important part of this arc, the banger moments and panels we got. We got Leisha hulking out. I love this design. I don't know what to call this form, but I hope we get some kind of ref sheet model of this at some point because it looks sick. Also, the Rian panel at the very end goes so hard. Beatrice getting stabbed, the snakes getting cut off. All those amazing and phenomenal. I have some problems with the writing choices in some sections. I have some problems with how it was received too, and honestly how people reacted to the arc and treated the characters of Diana and Nadroj in general. I have some strong opinions on that. Let's start with Nadroj. We all felt that she felt a little off in characterization, right? She felt like she lacked kind of motivation besides revenge, which revenge is never a bad motivation for a villain, right? That's a pretty common one. But there's no end goal to the revenge that Nadroj is seeking. Does she want to kill Diana? Well, that doesn't sound very loving if she claims she does love Diana. And if she didn't love Diana, then why does she care enough to try and kill for her? It's a very weird thing to try and explain by just purely, I want revenge. And I wish that was described on. Also, the way she's just purely malicious to Diana is a complete turnaround, in my opinion, for her character. We all know she's been toxic. We all know Diana's been toxic. They're toxic to each other because they have not worked out jack shit about their own problems. That's a given. They're literally just really mean to each other all the time since the first comics. But they're still loyal. My point is that if you squint your brain a bit, you can realize that something feels wrong about the mood of what's going on. And I don't know how to fix that 100%. You would kind of have to rewrite motivations and some events for it to make more like solid concrete sense and have more solid motivations. But I think that it's a bit soft in terms of a foundation, but I think it doesn't hinder it from standing, if my metaphor makes sense. Actually, let's get into my next point, which cannot make sense no matter what way you look at it. No way Max did not know Nadroj and Diana were married. No actual way. Anne is Max's assistant, so she could know through that. Max would have had to see signs of marriage in that house when she went over to Nadroj's. Max has met Diana before. It can't be just on one occasion. Max was definitely at the wedding because Max and Diana are technically relatives. And it literally shows her in this picture. But even if you want to say this picture and the concept of Max being at the wedding was retconned, there's still no way Max would not have noticed that there would have been Diana and Nadroj pictures in the house, or there would have been Diana stuff set up at the bedside table she was sleeping on, unless she had a brain tumor, I swear. Rant aside, could have easily said Max slept with a married woman and she was still fine with it. I would have believed that. Max is down bad enough to do that, even to her own great niece, I guess. It's kind of messed up, but I'd still believe it. And the last thing I have a problem with in this arc, kind of the reception of the comics. Mostly the comments that say stuff like, what did Diana ever see in Nadroj in general? Nadroj was always a red flag. They never were really in love or had any love. They're both red flags. Don't kid yourself. Don't kid yourself, Diana supporters. They're both red flags. And people who make the point of saying that they never loved each other or what did Diana see in Nadroj don't understand their relationship initially in general anyway. The point is that Diana loved Nadroj despite her being literally a murderer, you know? And Nadroj loved Diana despite her being a real idiot and despite her being a dying girl, pretty much. Diana fell in love with a serial killer and Nadroj fell in love with a woman who was slowly killing herself. Neither of those sound like compelling cases for a healthy relationship after they've died. Did they have genuine love? Yes. If you want to make a case for falling out of love, maybe. If you want to make the case for Nadroj had needs Diana could not meet and so she tried to find them somewhere else, even if that's not an excuse for what she did. Okay, that's the headcanon I go with because that's the one I can cram into this small narrative. But don't try to twist the story so that they never were in love in general, because that's not true if you go back and read the Before the Afterlife series and the first 100 trio comics, because I read them, so you can too. But trust me, they were definitely in love. That ends my criticism section. No matter how scathing that sounded, I still loved the arc. This is my favorite story arc so far, I would say. Even if, you know, the metaphorical writing ball was dropped in a few places. I've dropped the ball tons of times in writing, and we just have to move on. This is a purely what I would improve kind of perspective. My overall thoughts of the story arc, like I said, are very, very high, very positive. My favorite story arc in the trio of idiots so far. The only one that comes close is probably Beatrice's recovery arc, but I think this one has a bit more action and tension going on, which is the only reason it's winning out, because I like that. There's not as much tension in Beatrice's recovery arc. Though it struggles with characterization issues such as Nadroj not feeling like the same Nadroj we normally know, it more than makes up for, you know, engagement and hooking the reader with plenty of tension and interest in what's going on. I also kind of want to take now to discuss, you know, Cyan's more recent endeavor in making story arcs in his trio of idiots comics, you know. Before, if you wanted a real story arc, he had separate comics that had a story, but now you have story arcs within the trio of idiots to keep up with, which I think is really good. I think it keeps people coming back for more, for sure. I think in the future, we're probably going to have Carvations appear a lot more, since I feel like Leisha and Beatrice and Diana in the village is kind of his way of getting his foot in the door ever since Sydney's story, to have his foot in the door to bring Carvations into the Trio of Idiots comics as a more regular appearance. That's my hunch anyway. Don't cite me on that, but that's my hunch. I encourage that kind of thing though. I can't wait to see more Carvations, more Afterlife people that's maybe not Max, Beatrice, or Avon. Branch out from them, please. Can't wait to see what's gonna happen next, honestly. What the next big story arc is gonna be. That'll do it for today's video, though. If you liked this kind of, format where I just take a kind of story arc and talk about it, maybe I can even do, story arc explained videos. I don't know. If you want that, comment below if you want more of these kind of review videos. I'm more than happy to do reviews. Even this was a very brief, light review. If you're wondering where Anne was throughout the, this whole adventure, she's not in the comics, but I am writing a story right now on what she's doing while the breakup arc happens, and you can read that on my Instagram, And then when I finish that, I'll post the whole story in one PDF on my Discord server, and you can go download that, have that for whenever, I don't care. You can download the other stories I've written too in PDF form with a neat table of contents. I spent a good amount of time setting up those docs. If you want to support me in any way, I have a Ko-fi, so you can donate there. If we reach $80 in donations, then I'll write a story purely on what the community wants. So that would be a trip for sure. That'll do it for today. Bye everyone. Have a great day. Remember, you're beautiful.